Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us right here on The Right View. Tonight, we're joined by the award-winning, legendary sportscaster and host of Sideline Sanity, Michele Tafoya. Michele, I have to tell you, I am a huge fan of yours, and you have had the job that I wanted like my entire life. So
What?
yes, I love football. I always wanted to be a sideline reporter. I think the things that you have done in the sports world are awesome, obviously legendary. So where did I go wrong? How did it start for you?
I don't think you went wrong, Lara. I don't. I started in radio and I just fell in love with sports at an early age, thanks to my dad and my brother. And I just loved talking sports. And it became apparent to me about the time that Leslie Visser and Robin Roberts were coming up the ranks in sportscasting. Maybe I can do that. So I had role models now, and there weren't that many of them, but they were a couple that I really looked up to. And so I got out of graduate school. Believe it or not, I went back and got a master's in business just to be careful, to be on the side. Like just in case this doesn't work out, maybe I should have a master's degree. So I did that. And then I left it all behind. I left Southern California, moved to Charlotte, North Carolina, and did close to a year on sports talk radio there. Moved to Minnesota, where I currently reside, was doing sports talk radio here. And CBS needed some young, new talent. And I got an interview and I got a job that I really wasn't ready for. It was baptism by fire, but I survived the fire and it kind of just went from there.
Wow. Well, we know all about baptism by fire, so to speak. Sometimes I feel like that's the best way sometimes, because if you can make it, whatever it is that you're doing, kind of like fake it till you make it, right? Like you just figure it out as you go along. And I'll tell you, for us in our family, that's certainly what happened whenever my father-in-law decided to run for president. Nobody tells you how to do this stuff. None of us had a political background. Quite frankly, none of us had ever done any television interviews, to the extent that we then started to do them. So you just get out there and you do it. It obviously worked out for you and you were able to hack it. And obviously, we know the rest of the story. Your career took off. You really became such a staple, I think, in people's homes during Sunday night football. We are always used to seeing your face on the sidelines, and you're just kind of part of everybody's football experience. Did you ever imagine, though, Michele, when you started, that would happen?
No. I mean, I hoped. I always wanted to cover the NFL. I covered the NBA quite extensively as well. But when I had my first child, I said, I'm missing a lot of time at home. I was never home. It was from NBA to NFL back to NBA again, and there were no breaks, and I was missing a lot. So I left the NBA and I focused on the NFL. And the next thing I knew, I was on Monday Night Football and then Sunday Night Football. I couldn't have imagined I would get to that. I mean, when I got the Monday Night Football job, that's where things became a little surreal for me. I was working with John Madden and Al Michaels, and when I got the job, it was announced, like I saw it go on a lower third on one of the news networks. I'm like, whoa, this is because Monday Night Football is an iconic show.
Yeah.
And so that was a time when my husband and I kind of looked at each other and said, this is sort of next level now. And I got to really watch my P's and Q's and get myself mentally ready for this. Yeah. It was a little overwhelming, but I think I was ready. And again, like you said, you just keep on going. And with every mistake you make and every trip up that you have, you try to grow from it. And I think that I did that.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously it seemed to work out for you. So you were kind of saying you were interested in sports mostly because of your dad and brother. Did you play sports growing up?
I did. I was not good, but I played. I was a really good defender in basketball because all that required was tenacity, just like, yeah. But other than that, I was not a great athlete. My brother was a really, really fine basketball player, and he was 6'7", so it kind of helped. Did not run in the family. We always tease my mom that, she had some visit from a postman or something. He's like the most giant person in our family. But I was not a good athlete. I loved it though. I loved watching, and I was a good talker. I was always doing debate and drama and that kind of stuff. So it sort of my two passions melded in that way.
That's so cool. And to be a woman, obviously, in a field that has traditionally been so heavily dominated by men, I imagine when you started, maybe was that ever a challenge for you? Did you think about that sort of thing? Because, I probably kind of grew up like you. I loved football. My dad played football in college. He went to the NFL and broke his collarbone, and that ended things. But I loved it so much, and I was always so interested in the game. But so many of my friends who were girls growing up were like, why do you even like football? Because it's, of course you think of guys. How was that for you kind of coming into it all?
One of my first auditions was on a radio station in San Diego. And the day after I auditioned on live radio, it wasn't just like send in a tape. It was go sit in a studio with this for several hours. And I did that. And I'm sure I wasn't ready, but I held it together. And the next day, one of their other commentators came on the air and said, that Michele, she needs to be in a kitchen barefoot and pregnant. Honest to God.
Wow.
But I sort of laughed at that, and I just had a lot of confidence that ultimately I could do this.
Yeah.
But so that was the first real, that's really sexist, right? That's really insane. Yeah. As I got on with my career, I was really, in most cases, the only woman in a press conference or, on courtside, or one of very few. So you did notice it, but I also told myself, I'm not going into this to be a female sideline reporter. I'm going into this to be a sports journalist, and I don't care what you look like or who you are or what your chromosomes are. I'm going to compete with you. I'm coming for you. And I'm just going to prepare as hard as I possibly can. And so my life became all about preparation. Honestly, just constant study, constant work. I wanted to make sure that whenever I did walk into one of those situations, I was more prepared than anyone else in the room. And very often I was.
I love it. I mean, that's the way to do it. Put the work in. And I love the idea that you weren't, obviously there to make any sort of statement or do something for women. It just so happens you're a woman who loves sports and loved your job. And I think that's probably the coolest part of all. So you had this amazing career, and then you retired from sportscasting at the beginning of 2022, right after the Super Bowl. Almost immediately, though, you kind of jumped into the fray of politics, which I got to tell you, for someone to just come out of the blue kind of like you, I feel like that probably shocked a lot of people. What was the response?
I think some people were shocked, and they made some assumptions about me right away that were wrong. But here's the thing. I had been planning this for a long time. 9/11 really changed me. And by the time I had been through several years on Sunday Night Football, I think it was 2018, I gave my notice. I said, this is going to be my final year, and then I'm done. And they kept sort of drawing me back in. Well, could you do the Olympics in Japan? And then could you know what, just get us through this one more Super Bowl. So ultimately.
Oh, that's really cool, Michele, that they loved you so much and you were in such high demand that they were like, please don't leave. You're so great. We wanted you to stay. That's awesome. That must have felt good.
Well, it's funny because I never really thought of it that way. I've been one of those people that kind of feels like I'm getting away with this career, like this is, and so I didn't look at it that way. I just but my producer, Fred Godelli, who produced Monday Night Football and Sunday Night Football, was a great champion of mine. And I didn't realize that over the course of all those years together, he really felt so at ease handing me the keys every Sunday and saying, we trust you, go do it. And I didn't realize how hard that is to come by. And so that I think is why it was so meaningful for him to have me around. So yes, it was wonderful. Al and by this time Chris Collinsworth are like my family. This is my family. But I had so much going on in my head about the direction of the country, and I was so frustrated, and I couldn't. When you're on the number one show on television, which Sunday Night Football was for 11 straight years, you don't want to court controversy. And I respected that. And I knew that I couldn't just get out on Twitter and say whatever the heck I wanted to without courting that controversy with the country as divided as it remains. And so in order to be able to have my voice, I had to leave. And it was more important to me. I have 2 kids. I love this country so much. And I just couldn't stay quiet anymore. It was driving me crazy. And so I left.
Wow. I mean, that honestly, it really is such a commendable thing because, I think for a lot of people, they would say, well, I feel very strongly about this, but I know what the implications are if I decide to come out and speak my mind. And if I am on a certain side of the aisle that is not warmly embraced, shall we say, by folks in the mainstream media, by Hollywood, on social media, etc. So quite frankly, Michele, that took a lot of guts for you to come out and do that. And what surprised you the most when the news stories started coming out? Because I'm sure they kind of came like fast and furious.
Well, there was this period of time toward the end of the season where I had been promised 4 games off because in order to keep me around those last few years, they said, look, we'll make this as easy as we can. You can take 4 games off. Al's going to take 4 games off. You can choose whatever games you want. Well, my nature was choose the cold weather games. I hate covering cold weather games. I just absolutely hate it. So, I mean, I love it, but it was so hard.
God, I don't blame you. I always look at during those games. First of all, I'm like, well, the players, it must be miserable, but at least they're warm. Whoever's on the sidelines, God bless. That's a tough one.
You learn over the course of many years, Lara, that you've got to have the right equipment. But anyway. So I chose, I'm going to take off the cold weather games. And there were like 3 within a short period of time. Well, everyone thought I got suspended because I had been on The View and had talked about Colin Kaepernick and other things. That nothing could be further from the truth. So that really surprised me because stories came out that said, oh, we think she's been suspended. We've called her for comment. And nobody had called me for comment.
Of course they hadn't called you. Welcome to our world. It's kind of shocking, I think, when it starts to happen to you and you say, well, I've read stories out there about people. That's why everything I take with a huge grain of salt, even if it's, a story about someone with whom I disagree on most everything, I say, well, I know the things that they've written about us, that they've said about us, and most of them, they're just not true. That's crazy. Nobody even called you.
No one called me. And so to say that we reached out and haven't heard back, I kept saying, where's the phone call? I didn't get an email. I got nothing. So that part really bothered me, that people, A, thought I got suspended when I hadn't, and B, they thought that was the reason I was leaving, which it wasn't. So, but again, like you said, to have it in print, we reached out to Tafoya, but I was blown away because as a reporter, I would never do that, ever. And so to know that there were reporters who would do that, I was shocked. And maybe I was naive to that point, but it really woke me up to what you and many people, whoever they are, go through. When someone's trying to get a story out first, they'll skip all the important steps. And even after they've broken the story, they still don't call you back for comment. And then when you do comment, they bury it way down in the article where no one's going to get to it. So that was really eye-opening, should we say. And then the fact that because I didn't, one of my first appearances was on Tucker Carlson, and we talked about critical race theory and how I'm not in favor of it being taught in high school or below. Oh my gosh, I got called a racist immediately. And that was really hurtful.
Well, that's the thing that I think we all found very interesting. And I think when it first happens, when you're kind of in that light and they're coming after you and they're calling you names, and gosh, I can tell you, word of advice, never read the comments on any article written about you out there because they're always bad. But the things that people would say about me, about my husband, about my father-in-law, about our family, things I knew weren't true and are obviously very hurtful things to say about people initially for me, I was kind of like, oh my gosh, how do I process this? It was upsetting. And then sadly, I think it's almost like you develop like a callus over time, and you realize these people don't know you. They have no idea, who you are, and what they say ultimately doesn't matter. It's easy to be, behind a screen of some variety and just kind of say whatever you want. They would never say this to your face. Right. Have you reached a point where you kind of feel like that, or is it still kind of challenging for you?
No, I had been fortunate enough to have all those years making mistakes on television that any little mistake you make on television, someone's going to nail you.
Oh, yeah.
So I had learned, not to read tweets, not to read comments. I had learned all that, and I had thickened my skin. And in fact, something you mentioned earlier, and this is one of the things that drove me even more quickly to do this. I have friends who said, "Oh, I can't retweet that article because even though I believe it, I'm going to get,
see."
And I'm like, this is not the America I grew up in, and it's not the America that I see described in our history.
Right.
And this is like authoritarianism. This is cancellation. This freedom of speech is going like this. And I've had lawyers say to me, "Oh, gentle reminder, freedom of speech only protects you from the government. It doesn't protect you from corporate America and the like." And I thought, that may be factually and legally the case.
Right.
But are we really going to accept living in a country where you can lose your job because of an opinion? And look, some of it may be warranted, but some of it's been absolutely asinine. And I thought, I can take it. I can handle it. I'm going to just be one voice for people who feel like they can't post this stuff. I'll post it for them.
Well, and you know what? What you're saying is so true. And look, if there's ever even people taking a pause in any way and saying, I want to express my opinion on this, my viewpoint on this, but it's not worth it. That is very un-American to me. Yeah. We have in our First Amendment, because it is that important, our freedom of speech given to us as Americans. And there are so many people, Michele, like you're saying, who are afraid to say how they really feel out there. And it is the exact reason that I truly believe that there are so many more people who feel the same way we do than you will ever see reflected in a poll, than they will ever come out and say, you'll never fully grasp it, but I believe it's there. It's the silent majority. It's what we continue to talk about. But I have to tell you what you did, and honestly, the bravery, quite frankly, that you showed by coming out and being willing to put yourself out there and kind of just be a target for, the nastiness, whatever it is people want to say about you, I'm sure, are helping inspire people, giving them a voice, making them feel more comfortable to express themselves. That's what this country is all about. And I have to say thank you, because I wish we had more people that were willing to do it. But I love that you did that. And I'm sure with the bad, you've probably also gotten very positive feedback.
It's nice. I do. It feels like the minority of it is, but I will also say that I've had neighbors walk by and say, "Oh, heard your podcast, loved it," or saw you on Gutfeld, loved it.
Yeah.
So I do get, and you know what else I get are direct messages from other announcers, big time announcers in the sports world, athletes, a wide array of people that you would not expect, or you might be surprised.
Yeah.
Write and say, "I saw your comment," or "I read this," or "I saw you on this show. I am so glad you're doing this. I wish I could." And so that is what makes me feel. I was on a plane going to New York, and this gentleman sitting next to me said, "What are you going to New York for?" And I said, "I'm just doing an appearance on a show." And he goes, "Well, would you remind the show that you're doing that there are a lot of us in between LA and New York, that not everyone lives in LA and New York?" And I said, "Don't worry. I think they already know that." Yeah. But I was going to do Gutfeld. But yeah, it is amazing that we're, those of us here that live in the Midwest are just considered unimportant, not worldly enough, flyover country, whatever. And those are the people who are really ticked off right now.
That's right. Well, and I wanted to ask you about this because, look, we as a family, starting in 2016, got to travel across the entire country. We did it in 2016, 2018, 2020. I know you've traveled the entire country. I don't even know how many times. You live in sort of the middle of the country. You know that it's bigger than just New York and LA. So as we approach this November, these midterm elections, what do you expect to see happen?
Well, there was a point at which I thought the red wave tsunami was coming for sure. And then, of course, the Dobbs situation made abortion come right to the forefront and scared a lot of people. And so we're dealing with that certainly here in Minnesota. We've got a governor's race that I think is really important, but the current governor, who's a Democrat, is trying to pin this pro-life, he's going to take your rights away and all of that, even though abortion is codified into the Constitution here in Minnesota. So no governor can do that. But the political ads just make you want to vomit. I'm sure you've been through that too, tenfold to what we see in one place. But I still hope that what really matters to people are crime and inflation and gas prices and schools, which is a big issue for me. And these things that are being really overlooked, I think, by this administration, and they're trying to claim this and that. I think people are going to vote with those issues in mind more than anything. I do know, though, that there's going to be a portion that is just going to think that this abortion issue is the one and only issue that affects them. And that to me is unfortunate. But so I don't know. I still think the House is going to go Republican. I don't know about the Senate. I just don't know anymore, but we'll see. What do you think?
Well, I think people have to get out and vote. I think, if there's ever a time where we need to get our friends, get our family, get everybody we know right out to make, things go the way that we would like them to go, this is the election, because we've seen how scary things can get in 19 months. And it's been so bad for this country. And what you're talking about, Michele, it drives me crazy because people are so uninformed, and it's intentional on the part of the mainstream media. They do not want to tell people the truth, that the reason this decision was made by the Supreme Court is because if you look at the United States Constitution, abortion is not a right in the Constitution. So the best thing possible, the best way to reflect the will of the people is to send the decision back state by state to be made. And that is ultimately what's going to happen here. But they have been lying to America. I saw an interview with our Vice President, Kamala Harris, this weekend, where she talks about abortion being a constitutional right. It is not. They have lied to people, and they have told people that a right has been taken from them and that abortion will be outlawed across America. It's false, and they've lied to people, and it's obviously having the effect that they hoped it would have in getting people all stirred up and worked up. But I am right on target with what you're saying as well. I think at the end of the day, if people don't have enough money to both fill up their gas tank and go pay for all the groceries they need for their families, if they haven't taken a vacation with their families in 4 years and they can't afford to do it now because inflation is so high, they're not making enough money to cover everything, they're mad. They're really pissed off right now, and they're saying something has to change. So I hope everybody takes that and they turn out and they vote Republican, because, gosh, I just am terrified as to what the result for this country might be if the Democrats maintain control. So
I'm with you.
We'll see what happens.
We'll see what happens. And so it's abortion. And the other thing that the vice president wasn't so honest about was the border, when she said the border is secure.
Our borders are? Yeah.
Yes. Borders as the border is secure. And it's insulting.
It is.
I don't really get offended. I don't give people the power to offend me. I think that's really important that people remember that if they're offended, they're kind of taking part in the crime. That you don't have to be offended. You can just laugh somebody off and say whatever. But I can be insulted. And I think that she insults the intelligence of so many Americans when she says the border is secure.
Totally. You mentioned, by the way, your podcast, Sideline Sanity. Tell me a little bit about that, and what do you hope that people who tune in kind of are getting out of it?
I hope, very much like this conversation you and I are having, to have sane conversations with people and to amplify some voices that really haven't been amplified yet. Yes, I want to have the big time guests on and all of that. I'm keeping mine just short little chunks so that they're listenable on a walk or a run or a quick drive. And I'm trying to really, like, one of the things that I felt so deeply while I was having to stay quiet was how insane the world is. And we need a return to sanity. And with all these wacky voices out there acting as though what's real isn't real, I feel like the world is flip-flopped and we're all living in this alternative universe or alternate universe. I can never remember which one is correct. But anyway, a different place where the sky isn't really blue. And so I'm trying to just bring sanity to some conversations and really, like I said, have guests on who just speak common sense.
How refreshing, and how sad that we have to say that, but it's kind of it's where we are right now, I guess, in our world in general, right? It's kind of sad. Final question for you: would you ever run for political office? Why or why not?
This is a very big question, and it's an important one because I've thought about it and I've been asked to run many times for governor of Minnesota. I think it's in the back of my mind. I've got school-age children. I don't want to do it while they're in school. I've missed so much of my kids' lives being on the road that I'm enjoying right now going to football games and my daughter's soccer games, my son's football games, being home to help with homework, all that stuff, I missed so much of. So now is not the time. And I wouldn't completely rule it out. You never say never, because I think we do need some sane voices in that place they call Washington, D.C. Or in other houses of policymaking. It's very sad to me that our politics have gotten as low as they've gotten. And so if I felt like I could help and make a difference, I would consider it.
I bet you'd get a lot of votes. I'm just saying. So I love that it's in the back of your mind, and I totally get it. My kids are very young. I considered doing something in politics myself, although at this point, I mean, gosh, so many of us in our family look at each other, we're like, why would we want to put ourselves through this? But to your point,
you've got the experience. Know what you're going into.
Unfortunately, sometimes being naive to something is actually better. We know exactly what we're getting into. But I agree with you. I think, raising my kids and being there for my kids is so important to me and so important to them as well. So I love that you're saying that you're able to do that. I'm sure your kids love having you around and having you back all the time. And, that's what it's all about.
It goes so fast. It goes so flipping fast. I can't believe it. So I've got to relish this time that they're still in my house.
Well, Michele, I got to tell you, you have so many people out there who have your back, who are thrilled that you've been able to speak your voice and to amplify it in every way possible. Again, you're just like such an icon, I think, for so many, especially women, even though maybe you didn't set out to do that, like myself, who really love sports. And I dreamed of being like a sideline reporter, a sportscaster for a long time. So thank you.
You could have done it.
Well, I guess I still could. Who do you think would hire me, Michele?
I think there'd be a lot of places that would hire you. I do.
Oh my gosh, very select markets, perhaps. But thank you for joining us on The Right View, and best of luck to you and everything you do. We know you'll be a great success.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
All right, to everybody at home, as always, thanks so much for joining us right here on The Right View. We'll see you back here next time for more.